Hey, if you clicked on this video, you must be asking yourself, can I retire early? Well, it's a great question. It's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video, whether you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, whatever your definition of early retirement is, we've got it covered. Follow me today and I'll show you exactly what you need to look into, what you need to calculate, how to look at this whole thing. My name's Jet, Vice President at W.A. Smith Financial. Let's get into it. Okay, so one of my favorite topics, one that we get asked a ton of questions about. I know that this is Googled very often, and so this is a great topic to come to you, and it's, can you retire early? Now, that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I want to keep this somewhat simple. These are the tips, the tools, the calculations that I think you need to start with to begin to answer this question. So, can you retire early? There's a lot of anxiety built into that question. There's a lot of questions that come into play that make you wonder, wow, if I do this, am I making a mistake? Will I screw something up? So let's get into this topic. I kind of love what I'm going to show you here. Two scenarios. First one is someone younger. Let's say you're a 35-year-old out there, and we've seen this trend, wanting to retire a little bit earlier. Typical normal retirement age, you might think it's 60, 62, 65. Let's say you're 35 years old and you have a plan and you've decided in 15 years, I want to retire. I want to retire when I'm 50 years old. That's scenario number one. And scenario number two is a little bit more of what we see, and we deal primarily with those who are 5 to 10 years away from retirement for the most part, but we get the 53-year-old who is just, they thought they would go longer. They wanted to work till 55 or 60 or 62, and they're just tired. You're tired and you want to go home and you don't want to work anymore and you want to retire, and you think more and more about it. And every day when you wake up, you go, oh my gosh, if I have to go back to the office or back to the plant or the factory one more time. So we've got the 53-year-old who wants to retire earlier than they expected that they would, but that date is just 2 short years away from them. All right, so I'm going to go through both scenarios. And honestly, you have to take both scenarios kind of the same way, which you'll see here. But before we get into the calculations and the math behind it, let's talk about the steps you need to consider. So the first one is very easy. Whether you're 35 years old, 45 years old, you're 50 years old, you're 55, and you want to retire early, whatever your definition of early retirement is, you have to have a really firm handle on what your income needs are, your budget, your monthly desires. What are you going to spend money on? How much is it going to cost you? Are you going to travel? Are you going to golf? What is your groceries going to cost you? What are your taxes costing you? What's your health care cost you? You have to have a handle on this, whether you're 20 years old or you're 60 years old. Now, number two, move that forward. And whether you're 35 wanting to retire at age 50 or you're 53 and you want to retire at age 55, you still have to do some forward looking at this and decide, hey, what might my retirement expenses and income needs be? What might that cash flow look like? Now, obviously, this is harder to project. The younger you are, if you're going 15 years out, 35 years old to age 50, it might be kind of hard for you to start to project what you might need to spend that many years from now. It's a heck of a lot easier if you're 53 and you're going to retire in 2 years at 55. So number one and number two is all about, what do I need to live happy? What are those budgetary needs, those income needs? How am I going to pay my bills? But also, what am I going to do for fun? What am I going to do for discretion and joy? You have to factor those things in too. Number three is, how much do you have to have saved? And that's the key. This is what everybody wants to know is, do I have enough? If I want to retire early in 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, do I have enough today? And how do I take what I have today and make sure that it's enough at that future point in time? It's very tricky. There's a lot of calculators out there that you can use. I'm going to show you how I do it, how we like to make it very simple here. Number four, you have to then invest with purpose, and this is where things change. If you've got 15 years, then I might suggest you invest your dollars a little differently than if you've only got 2 years before you want to retire. And so we'll talk a little bit about investing with purpose. And finally, the annual audit. you might think of Monte Carlo simulations and these big time plans that advisors can put into their software programs to tell you what your success rate is. And yeah, that's a great start too. But you have to have an annual look at this. Sometimes maybe semi-annual would be better. Maybe every quarter, maybe every 6 months. But you can't just set it and forget it, especially if you're putting a plan together to retire early. Now, here's the fancy tool that I've got, and so I wanted to show you my prop. This is the only thing that I'm going to use today. Now, you can use calculators, and I want to give you a word of caution. We've got a 10B2 Hewlett-Packard financial calculator. This is the only thing that I used in the projections that I'm going to show you today. Now, if you Google search financial calculators, and there's a whole lot of stuff on the internet today that you can find that will help you kind of do what I'm doing. So if that's what you want to do, then more power to you. But I could do it very easily with just a simple calculator. Let's get into scenario number one. We got the 35-year-old, if that's you, pay attention, who wants to retire in 15 years. Now you can take the same concept and say, hey, I'm 35 and I want to retire in 10 years. I'm 35 and I want to retire in 5 years at age 40. It does not matter. The same principles apply. I've got a calculation in here, and the first thing that we covered, as we just talked about, is what are the monthly income needs of this 35-year-old right now? They're $5,000 a month. To pay their bills, to do what they're doing, they spend $5,000 a month on average. They've got a calculated budget that they're able to attain. We have to factor in an annual inflation rate. Now, this is up for discussion. You can use whatever you choose. I threw in 2% as an assumption. An annual inflation rate of 2%, you could use 3, you could use 5. Inflation's very high right now, could be low right now. What is it? Maybe factor that factor in. Monthly income need at age 50. What I did is I took the $5,000 that the 35-year-old is spending now, and we factored inflation into it of 2% compounded annually, and $5,000 turns into $6,729 15 years from now. All right, so we've got a little bit of a different number now. Safe withdrawal rate, what are we talking about there? Well, how much, if you've got a portfolio of $1 million or $2 million or $500,000 or $250,000, how much of that portfolio can you safely withdraw every year without running out of money? Is it 2%, 4%? You've heard of the safe withdrawal rule on Wall Street, which is 4%. I'm being conservative and using 3.5% as the safe withdrawal rate. And what we come up to here is that in order to safely withdraw 3.5% to get 6729, you have to have $2.3 million 15 years from now. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have $2.3 million when you're 50 years old, you could safely withdraw 3.5% of it every year, and that would give you $6,729 a month. Now that's super simple. I didn't factor in taxes. I didn't factor in a higher rate of inflation. We're keeping it very low grade right now. Take it a step further. How much does that 35-year-old need to start with now? So back up, you're 35 and you're setting this plan and you want to retire at age 50 and you want to be able to spend about $6,700 in withdrawals from your portfolio at that future point in time. Run the math backwards. On the financial calculator, I plug in my future value. I need $2.3 million 15 years from now. That's my N, number of years. I'm going to assume that I can make 6% per year on my investments. You can use what you choose. Depends on how you invest, depends on your risk tolerance. You can get yourself into trouble with projections if you use a number that's too high. You could use a number that's too low, too conservative. So we've got something what I would deem kind of in the middle. If you're going to be fairly aggressive with your funds, we're going to make 6% on our money. But remember, during these 15 years, we're still going to be working. So we're not taking money out of the portfolio, we're adding money to the portfolio. Between 401k max contributions and some additional money that we're able to save that we don't spend of our paycheck, that's a critical component of retiring early, is making sure you're putting as much of your paycheck away as you fathomably possibly can. We're going to save $40,000 a year into the accounts, and we come up with the present value of we need to be starting with $575,000 at age 35. Now, if you're a 35-year-old who has $575,000, kudos to you. If you're not, Can you live on something less than $6,700 a month? You can plug and play with these variables all day long if you want to. Can you save more than $40,000? Can you make more than 6%? Every time you change an input, it changes the figures. Now go to scenario number 2. This is maybe a little bit more realistic in what I see. We've got the 53-year-old who wants to retire in 2 years. Their original plan, let's say it was age 60, but they've just had it. They can't stand going to work anymore. They want to spend more time with their grandkids. They want to spend a little bit more time on the golf course. They can't stand another Monday showing up in the week. So here they are and they want to know, hey, do I have enough money? Could I retire now? Right? Could I actually do it now? And so we kind of run the same thing. At 53, change the variables a little bit. Let's say that they need $7,000 a month to pay their bills and live life happy. They want to live life happy. Annual inflation rate, we still use 2%. 2 years from now, $7,000 looks more like $7,300 per month. We're still keeping that safe withdrawal rate of 3.5%. And therefore, at age 55, they need to have roughly $2.5 million. If they took 3.5% out of 2.5, they would have $72.82 every single month by way of distribution. Again, keeping it super simple, not factoring in Social Security or pension income that they could have coming in. How much do they need to start with at 53? Well, if you're 53 years old and you make 6% on your money over the next 2 years, and you add $40,000 annually to your pot by way of additional contributions and savings, then if you have about 2.3 million in 2 years, it will be about 2.5 million given these assumptions. And now you have enough to theoretically retire early. Seems simple, right? Well, hold the phone a minute. It's not that simple. These are the simple calculations. This is how to see if you're close. Do you have what it takes? Now I want to challenge you to think a little deeper now before you go racing to your boss and telling them, hey, I'm out of here next year. I've got enough to do this. 5 keys to remember as I close. Number 1, longevity. If you're retiring at 50, what kind of longevity do you have? None of us know when our clock will stop ticking. But we can look for clues. Males generally don't live as long as females. What about your family history? Are your parents still alive? Are they in their 70s, their 80s? Did they live into their 90s? Are their parents alive, potentially? So what kind of longevity do you have in your family? You have to understand that you have to pick something to live to. You're going to plan to age 85 and think you're going to be gone. You're going to plan to age 90. You're going to plan to age 100. Something that you have to consider. Gross versus net. This is probably the biggest one. I was talking very simple in the numbers. But if you're taking distributions out of a retirement account, you have to pay income taxes on those distributions more than likely. So if you needed $7,000 a month to live happy, but you have to pull money out of a retirement account that is pre-tax, you're going to owe federal and state income taxes. So we're talking gross withdrawal minus taxes could be the net amount that you actually get to spend. So you might need to figure that out. Withdrawals from qualified accounts. Think of 401ks. They've got rules too. That 35-year-old example that retires at age 50, you've got a rule that says that you cannot take distributions from your 401k. Let's say that was a main source of your savings. You can't take distributions until you're 59 and a half without an additional 10% penalty. Now, number 3, you've got rules when it comes to retirement accounts. You can't just take distributions whenever you want. So if you go back to that example, scenario 1, the 35-year-old who retires at age 50, that person is 9.5 years too young to take a withdrawal without additional penalty of 10% from their account. If you take a distribution from your 401k, from pre-tax money, before age 59 and a half, they hit you with not only federal and state income taxes depending on where you live, but they also hit you with a 10% excise tax. It's a premature distribution penalty because you took money out of that account too early. So you got to be careful with that. Same goes for the 53-year-old who retires at age 55. Now there's a special rule there where if you are age 55 when you retire and you are still with your active employer, you actually can take distributions without that 10% penalty tax from age 55 to age 59 and a half. But you have to have attained age 55 before you retire, and there's some rules you got to follow there. So put it to you simply, there are rules, right? Make sure you know the rules as far as distributions go on qualified retirement accounts. Number 4, do not forget about inflation, right? We did not factor in inflation in our scenarios. So inflation doesn't just cease to exist when you retire at age 50 or at age 55 like our scenarios show. You have to continuously factor in an inflation audit to that monthly income need based on your longevity. So if you're 50 and you think you could live till age 95, we're talking a long time of distributions from your retirement portfolio or your investable asset pool. So think about that a little bit. You might want to factor in inflation once a year or once every couple of years and continuously look at it as you age and as you go on down the line. And finally, another huge one, healthcare costs. This is actually one that we see people put off retirement because they're not exactly sure how they're going to fund this or pay for it, is that you have healthcare or health insurance through your employer, and if you retire, you're going to have to pay for that healthcare out of your pocket. So look at my scenarios. Did we factor additional expenditures into our monthly or our retirement budgets due to having to pay for healthcare out of pocket? What's healthcare going to cost you? Is it going to be extremely expensive? What will healthcare costs do? Will they rise over time? How long will you have to pay it? And then when you get to age 65, which is Medicare eligibility, how will your healthcare costs and your needs change then? So a big one, all 5 of these are keys to remember, especially specifically if you are someone who is trying to factor, can I retire early? Listen, I want you to retire early. If you can do it, more power to you. Find somebody like us who will help you do that. But remember the scenarios, remember the calculations, and do not forget the 5 keys to remember. Okay, don't go anywhere just yet. I've got something that you're going to want to see. But before we do that, if you have anything specific that you want us to educate about, drop that in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to our page for more educational content just like this. And right up here, you can catch one of my other videos where I talked exactly about 401ks, how those factor in to early retirement and withdrawals and rollovers. Don't miss it. Until next time, good luck to you.